to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. Tonight, let yourself drift into a gentle tale of a cozy inn tucked along Umbrella Row, where rain, lantern light, and small comforts quietly guide the mind toward rest. Settle in the way that feels easiest. Let your shoulders soften as if warm hands have smoothed away the day's tight knots. Allow your jaw to loosen. Let your tongue rest. If it helps, imagine your eyelids growing pleasantly heavy like curtains drawing across a bright window. Breathe in slowly, as though you are breathing in calm itself, and breathe out as though you are setting down something you no longer need to carry. In again, and out again. There is nowhere to go, nothing to solve, nothing you have to do except listen, and even listening can be easy. Thoughts may come and go like distant birds in a wide sky, passing without asking for your attention. As your breathing steadies, a soft scene begins to form, not sharp or demanding, but gentle and welcoming. There is a street where the air smells faintly of rainwater and polished wood. There is a hush, as if the world is wrapped in a quilt of mist. Somewhere ahead, a small inn glows like a friendly ember in the dusk, waiting patiently on Umbrella Row. And now, without effort, the story eases into its own rhythm, and the mind can simply follow along. Umbrella Row was a narrow lane that curved like a ribbon between old buildings, each one leaning companionably toward the next, as if sharing quiet gossip in the drizzle. The street had been named long ago, not because it was especially wet, though it often was, but because it was always sheltered. Umbrellas, hundreds of them, were suspended above the lane in gentle arcs. They were not held by hands, and they did not seem fixed by ordinary hooks. Instead, they floated just beneath the rooftops, tethered by thin cords like soft harp strings, and they swayed as the wind wandered through. Their canopies overlapped in layers, deep and bright and soothing, creating a patchwork sky. Some were the color of blueberries, some were pale as oat milk, some carried patterns of tiny stars, others looked like pressed petals, as if gardens had been stitched into cloth. When rain fell, it did not fall hard. It tapped, it whispered, it made a delicate music on fabric and wood. The umbrellas caught the drops and spread them into 1,000 tiny streams that slid to the gutters with the patience of time. Beneath that shelter, the lane stayed dim and calm, filled with the soft clop of footsteps and the glow of windows that never seemed harsh. At the center of Umbrella Row, where the lane widened into a small crescent, stood the inn. It was called the Hearth-and-Hush, and it looked like something imagined by a person who loved comfort more than grandeur. The building was built of warm stone and old timber, with beams darkened by seasons of rain and sun. A long sign hung above the door, painted with a small hearth. It its flame shaped like a curled leaf. Beneath it, the word hush was written in a script that made the eye slow down, as if the letters themselves were breathing. The inn's windows were not large, but they were generous with light. That light was honeyed and steady, the kind that warmed rather than dazzled. Through the glass, one could glimpse curtains the color of moss, a corner of a bookcase, the lazy flicker of fire. A brass bell rested near the front step, though no one seemed to ring it. The door opened when it wished, with a quiet sigh, as if the inn recognized those who arrived with tiredness tucked behind their ribs. On one particular evening, as mist drifted beneath the umbrellas and rain wrote faint silver lines through the air, a traveler came to Umbrella Row. The traveler's name did not matter much, because the lane did not ask for names the way cities do. Umbrella Row asked only for pace. It liked those who walked slowly enough to notice the way lantern light caught on puddles and the way the umbrellas overhead shifted like a gentle tide. The traveler had been on the road for a while, carrying a small pack and a quiet kind of weariness. Not a dramatic weariness, not the sort that demanded attention, more like the tiredness that settles into the bones after too many days of striving, too many small decisions, too many moments of being on. As the traveler stepped beneath the first arch of umbrellas, the air changed. It softened, it cooled. The sounds of the wider world faded, as if someone had closed a door far away. The traveler slowed without thinking, shoulders dropping, breath easing. Umbrella Row welcomed newcomers with simple kindness. The shop windows held things that seemed chosen for calm. Bowls of smooth sea glass, little tins of tea with labels drawn by hand, candles that smelled like cedar and honey. In one doorway, a cat lay curled, nose tucked under tail, completely unconcerned with the rain. In another, a woman swept her threshold with small rhythmic strokes, as if sweeping away not dust, but worry. The traveler reached the crescent, where the Hearth-and-Hush stood waiting. The door was wooden and thick, with a round window like a small moon. A wreath of dried herbs hung in the center, lavender, thyme, and a sprig of something that smelled faintly of sweet mint when the air shifted. Above, the floating umbrellas gathered closer, their canopies forming a sheltered dome, as though the street itself wished to keep this doorway dry. The traveler approached. Before a hand could lift, the door sighed open. Warmth flowed out. Not a blast, not a shove, just a steady invitation. Inside, a fire murmured behind a low iron grate. The room smelled of bread cooling on a rack and of wood smoke that had learned to be polite. Light gathered in corners like puddles of amber. A small brass chime near the door made a sound so soft it felt more like a thought than a noise. Behind a counter of polished oak stood the innkeeper. The innkeeper was neither young nor old in any definite way, as if time had decided to be gentle and vague here. Their hair was streaked with silver, loosely tied back, and their eyes held the calm of someone who had watched many storms pass without taking them personally. "Welcome," the innkeeper said, voice low and steady. It was the kind of voice that made shoulders unclench. "Umbrella Row is kind to those who arrive in drizzle." The traveler gave a small nod, suddenly aware of damp sleeves and rain-washed hair. The innkeeper did not seem to mind. In fact, the innkeeper seemed quietly pleased by the sight of someone stepping out of the weather. "Come near to the fire," the innkeeper murmured. "No need to hurry." The traveler moved toward a rug laid before the hearth. It was thick and soft, woven in patterns like ripples across a pond. A chair waited there, wide with curved arms, and a cushion that looked as if it had been plumped for exactly this purpose. The innkeeper set a mug on a nearby table. Steam rose in lazy coils. "A little tea," the innkeeper said, as if tea were the most natural answer to the world. "Something warm for the inside." The traveler lifted the mug. The scent was subtle, chamomile perhaps, and something like baked apple. The first sip was gentle, the second even gentler, as if the tea knew it was not meant to wake the mind but to settle it. While the traveler warmed by the fire, the inn showed its quiet life. There were other guests, but they were not loud, not demanding. A pair of people sat by a window with a map spread between them, speaking in murmurs. In another corner, someone stitched a small piece of cloth, needle flashing softly as it moved. Near the bookcase, a person with a shawl the color of moonlight turned a page with unhurried care. The floorboards creaked in friendly ways. The curtains breathed faintly when the door opened and closed. Every object seemed placed not for display, but for comfort. A bell on the counter did not ring, but a sleepy clock ticked from a shelf, as if keeping time for the sake of tradition rather than urgency. The innkeeper returned with a small cloth and offered it wordlessly. The traveler used it to dab rain from their hair. It felt oddly relieving to be tended to without fuss. When the traveler was warm enough to notice hunger, the innkeeper placed a plate on the table, bread still faintly warm, a bowl of soup that smelled like roasted carrots and herbs, a pat of butter that melted at the edges. "Eat slowly," the innkeeper suggested. "The Hearth-and-Hush does not rush meals." The traveler did, and it felt like remembering something important. Each bite was simple. Each swallow carried warmth deeper, down into places that had been tense without realizing it. After the meal, the innkeeper leaned on the counter and watched the fire for a moment, as though listening to it. "There are rooms upstairs," the innkeeper said softly. "Each one different, each one quiet. Some guests prefer a window that looks onto the umbrellas. Some prefer a room that looks inward toward the courtyard, where the rain makes a little pond. Which feels right tonight?" The traveler considered. The idea of a window looking up at floating umbrellas felt like a small wonder, and wonder, in the right measure, could soothe the mind. "The umbrellas," the traveler said, voice hushed by the room. The innkeeper nodded, as if that answer had been waiting. A key appeared on the counter, old brass, warm from being held. A gentle climb, the innkeeper said, and if the stairs creak, it is only the house reminding everyone to step softly. The traveler took the key. It was heavier than expected, comforting in its weight. The stairway rose in a slow curve, banister smooth from many hands. Along the wall hung framed sketches of umbrellas in different moods, umbrellas in wind, umbrellas in sun, umbrellas with raindrops clinging like beads. There were also small paintings of the inn itself, as if the building enjoyed seeing itself reflected. At the top of the stairs, a hallway stretched with doors on either side. Lanterns hung at intervals, their glass chimneys fogged slightly, as if they held warmth close. The air smelled like clean linen and faint cedar. The traveler found the room and turned the key. The lock clicked with a sound, like a tiny promise. Inside, the room felt like an embrace. A bed sat beneath a sloped ceiling, piled with quilts. The quilts were layered in soft colors: cream, deep green, faded blue. Pillows weighted like clouds. A small table held another lamp, and beside it, a book with a worn spine, as if many sleepy hands had opened it before. A window took up a portion of the wall. Beyond it, umbrella row arched overhead, umbrellas drifting in gentle sways. Drops of rain slid from one canopy to another, like secrets passed along. The traveler set down the pack and crossed to the window. Below, the lane glimmered. Lanterns cast circles of light on the stones, and those circles seemed to float in the puddles. The world here was small and safe. On the table near the bed was a note written in neat handwriting. "Sleep comes easier," it read, "when the day is given a place to rest. If thoughts linger, imagine them as raindrops on an umbrella. They land, they shimmer, and they slide away." The traveler smiled at that, the kind of smile that barely moved the face but softened something inside. The traveler washed hands in a basin that held water warmed by some unseen kindness. The towel was thick and smelled faintly of lavender. Then the traveler changed into a comfortable shirt set out in the wardrobe, as if the inn had known what would feel right. When the traveler lay down, the mattress gave gently as though it had been waiting. The quilts settled like slow waves. The lamp beside the bed glowed low. Outside, the umbrellas moved. The rain continued its patient tapping, a steady lullaby. For a while, the traveler lay awake, not because of worry, but because quiet can feel unfamiliar when one has grown used to noise. So the traveler listened. The inn's sounds were soft, the distant murmur of the fire downstairs, the occasional creak of wood adjusting, the faint clink of a cup being set down somewhere. None of it asked for attention. It was merely proof of life continuing gently. As the traveler's breathing slowed, sleep approached, like a cat, silent, unhurried, certain it would be welcomed. But before sleep fully arrived, something else stirred, a curiosity, light as a feather. The traveler had heard in passing that Umbrella Row held small enchantments, not the kind that turned pumpkins into carriages, not the kind that demanded brave quests. These were quieter enchantments designed for tired hearts. A street that sheltered, an inn that knew how to hush. And in the traveler's half-dreaming mind, the inn seemed to whisper, "There is more comfort here than a bed. There are rooms within rooms. There are gentle places the waking world forgets." In the middle of the night, the traveler stirred and rose, drawn not by restlessness, but by a calm pull, like the tide calling in sleep. The hallway outside the room was dim, lanterns turned low. The inn felt even softer at this hour, as if it held its breath so guests could dream. The traveler moved quietly down the stairs. The fire downstairs still glowed, banked but alive. In the common room, the chairs sat empty, their cushions holding the memory of warmth. A kettle rested on the hearth, and the air carried the faint scent of tea even now. On the far wall, partially hidden by a hanging tapestry, was a door the traveler had not noticed before. The tapestry showed Umbrella Row in a different season, perhaps late autumn. Leaves drifted beneath the umbrellas like small boats. Lanterns glowed as if they were apples of light. The traveler lifted the edge of the tapestry. The door behind it was narrow and painted the color of rain clouds. There was no lock, only a small wooden handle worn smooth. The traveler hesitated, not with fear, but with the gentle sense of stepping into something private. Then, as naturally as breathing, the traveler turned the handle and stepped through. Beyond was a small room that felt like a secret kept kindly. It was a library, but not like grand libraries with high ceilings and echoing halls. This one was tucked and warm, lined with shelves that curved like arms around the space. Books filled every shelf, their spines a mosaic of colors. A ladder rested against one wall, and a window, round as a bubble, looked out into a courtyard where rain collected in a shallow pond. The pond reflected a patch of sky, and in that reflection, the umbrellas overhead looked like drifting flowers. In the center of the library was a chair with a footstool, and beside it a little table holding a lamp with a shade made of stitched fabric. The lamp's light was as soft as candlelight, but steadier, a patient glow. There was also a small bowl filled with smooth stones. Each stone was etched with a single word: rest, ease, quiet, soft, home. The traveler picked up one stone. It was warm, as if it had been sitting in sunlight, though no sunlight reached here. The word quiet was carved into it, and tracing the letters with a thumb felt strangely soothing, like smoothing out a wrinkle. A book lay open on the chair, as if someone had been reading and simply stepped away for a moment. Its pages were slightly yellowed, and the text was written in a flowing script. The traveler sat and began to read, not with alert focus, but with the slow drifting attention of someone near sleep. The story in the book was about a place much like this, an inn where the rain was always kind, where umbrellas floated overhead, where the night was full of gentle rooms. It described guests arriving with heavy hearts and leaving with lighter steps. It spoke of quilts that held warmth even when the fire faded. It mentioned a bell that chimed only when someone needed comfort. The traveler read a few lines, then a few more, and the words seemed to soften as they entered the mind, like warm milk poured into a cup. At some point, the traveler stopped reading and simply listened to the rain in the courtyard. A drip fell from a leaf into the pond. Another followed. Ripples widened and widened until they vanished. The library held a silence that did not feel empty, but full of time, full of calm, full of permission to let go. The traveler's eyelids grew heavy. The book remained open on the lap, but the words began to blur into shapes. The lamp's light pooled on the floor. The chair held the traveler securely, as if it had been made for this moment. In the quiet, the innkeeper appeared at the doorway. Not startling, not sudden, just present, as if they had always been there. They carried a blanket, soft and light, and they draped it over the traveler's shoulders with the care of someone tucking in a child. "No need to wander far," the innkeeper whispered. "The inn will bring comfort to whoever seeks it." The traveler, half asleep, managed a small nod. The innkeeper smiled, the kind of smile that asked nothing in return. Then they stepped away, leaving the traveler to drift. The traveler's dreams began to mingle with the library's hush. In the dream, Umbrella Row was brighter, the umbrellas glowing softly as if lit from within. The lane below was empty, stones shining like river rocks. The traveler walked there, footsteps silent. Lanterns floated instead of hanging, swaying gently as though they too were umbrellas of light. In the dream, the traveler came to the Hearth-and-Hush again, but the inn was larger inside than it should have been. Hallways curved like gentle streams. Doors opened onto rooms full of comfort. One room was filled with pillows like hills of cloud. Another held a greenhouse of sleepy plants that breathed out calm. Another was a kitchen where bread baked endlessly, filling the air with warmth. There was a room, too, where the walls were made of thick curtains, and behind them the sound of rain played like music. The traveler stood there, letting the sound wash through, as if it could rinse the mind clean. In the dream, the traveler met other guests, but they were not strangers. They were familiar in the way of dreams, faces that felt like kindness. They smiled and moved slowly, each carrying something gentle, a cup of tea, a candle, a folded blanket, a book. No one spoke loudly. Words were not necessary. The whole dream was woven from quiet gestures, and over everything the umbrellas swayed, keeping the world sheltered. When the traveler woke, it was not a sharp waking. It was more like floating up through warm water. The library was still, the lamp still lit, its glow softened. The blanket lay over the traveler's shoulders. The book remained open, As though it had been reading itself, the traveler stood slowly, stretching without strain. Outside the round window, the courtyard pond shimmered. Rain was lighter now, more like mist. The ripples were small, almost invisible. The traveler returned the book to the table with gentle care and placed the quiet stone back into the bowl. As the traveler stepped out of the library, the tapestry fell back into place behind, hiding the narrow door again. The inn's common room was dim and peaceful. The fire glowed faintly, holding on to warmth. The traveler climbed the stairs and returned to the room with the window, 2 umbrella row. The bed welcomed the traveler back as if no time had passed. The quilts rose and settled. The pillows held the head in the easiest way. Outside, the umbrella still drifted. A few drops of rain slid from one canopy to another, slow and silvery. The traveler's breathing deepened. Sleep now arrived fully. It wrapped the traveler in softness and carried the mind away like a boat on a quiet river. Morning, when it came, was gentle too. Light did not burst into the room. It seeped in gradually, filtered through layers of umbrella fabric, tinted slightly by their colors. The ceiling looked like it wore a faint rainbow made of softened hues. A wash of blue here, a blush of pink there, a mellow green. The traveler woke with a calm heaviness, the pleasant weight of someone who has slept deeper than expected. Downstairs, the inn's common room smelled of breakfast, warm oats, cinnamon, perhaps a hint of citrus. The fire was brighter now, not roaring, simply content. Other guests sat scattered at tables, speaking in low voices. A kettle sang softly on the hearth. The innkeeper moved among the tables with a tray, placing bowls and cups, with the quiet grace of a person who had learned that mornings too deserved tenderness. The traveler sat at a table near the window. Outside, umbrella row glistened. The rain had faded into a fine mist that made everything look newly washed. The innkeeper brought a bowl of oats topped with sliced fruit and a drizzle of honey. A cup of tea followed, steam curling. "Rest found you," the innkeeper said, not as a question, but as a simple observation. The traveler nodded, spoon hovering for a moment, grateful and a little amazed. "Umbrella row helps," the innkeeper added, "and the Hearth-and-Hush remembers how to be quiet." After breakfast, the traveler stepped outside. The air was cool and clean. The umbrellas overhead shimmered with lingering droplets. Some of them had shifted during the night, and now the pattern above the lane looked different, like a new quilt spread across the sky. Umbrella row moved slowly in the morning. Shopkeepers opened doors and swept thresholds. A baker carried a tray of rolls to a window display. A cat stretched on a doorstep, then curled again, as if stretching was the day's main accomplishment. The traveler walked beneath the umbrellas, feeling the world's softness. Each step on the stones felt steady. Each breath felt deeper. At the crescent, the traveler paused and looked back at the inn. The Hearth-and-Hush stood quietly, windows glowing, door closed. but welcoming. It seemed to hum faintly with comfort, like a lullaby woven into wood and stone. The traveler returned inside to gather the pack, though even packing felt unhurried here. Upstairs the room was tidy, quilts smoothed as if by invisible hands. The note still rested on the table. The traveler read it once more and felt the words settle like a gentle hand on the mind. Downstairs the innkeeper stood behind the counter. The traveler placed the key on the wood and offered thanks. Not extravagant, just honest. The innkeeper nodded, eyes kind. "Take the hush with you," they said softly. "Not as a thing to hold tightly, as a thing to remember is possible." The traveler stepped to the door. Before leaving, the traveler glanced once more at the common room. The fire, the chairs, the bookcase, the slow ticking clock. Everything here seemed designed to remind the body how to relax. Outside, Umbrella Row waited with its floating canopy of color and shelter. The traveler walked beneath it, slow and steady, as if learning a new pace. And though the traveler continued on, down the lane, past the shops, past the lanterns, past the last arch of umbrellas, something remained. A sense of warmth in the chest, like the memory of a hearth, a sense of quiet in the mind, like the memory of rain, a sense of being held even when the world was wide. Umbrella Row did not call after departing footsteps. It did not demand to be remembered. It simply remained what it was, a sheltered lane where comfort lived in small details, ready whenever someone needed it. Now the story begins to slow, like a candle flame settling when the air grows still. The Hearth-and-Hush stays glowing in the mind's distance, warm and safe. Umbrella Row continues to sway overhead, its umbrellas drifting gently, catching the last soft drops of rain. Breath moves in and out, easy and unforced. The sound of rain becomes quieter, softer, almost like the memory of rain rather than the rain itself. The lanterns along the lane glow low. The fire in the hearth quiets into embers. The quilts settle. The whole inn seems to exhale. Thoughts can loosen their grip, one by one, like hands unclasping. There is no need to follow them. They can simply pass like ripples, fading on a small courtyard pond. The world narrows into comfort. A warm chair, a soft bed, a sheltered street, a steady hush. Everything slows, everything softens, and in that softness, sleep can come as naturally as night comes to a window. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.